Do you even know whose name this hotel was built on? Silence. Not the casual kind. The kind that grips a room by the throat. 9 men. 2 women. Each dressed in tailored suits worth more than Naomi Carter's monthly paycheck. They sat stiffly around a mahogany conference table, right in the heart of the Ellington Hotel, Chicago's crown jewel. An empire carved in stone and secrecy. And there she was, a black woman in her early 30s, standing tall in a Navy housekeeping uniform. No invitation, no legal counsel, no family legacy to back her up, just an old necklace, a key, and the truth, buried beneath 70 years of polished marble and whispered lies. Across from her stood Mei Lin Chen, a Chinese-American woman in a snow-white power suit, calm, still, as if she had waited her entire life for this moment. But to understand why these 2 women, one once overlooked as a maid, the other once dismissed for speaking the wrong language, were now standing before the board of directors of a multi-million-dollar empire. You have to go back, 12 days back, to the day a red envelope, meant as a gesture of goodwill, was mistaken for a bribe, to the moment a hidden room, tucked behind a decorative wall on the 5th floor, whispered a story this city tried to erase, and to the second Naomi Carter, the invisible janitor, decided to stand up, not with power, but with a language no one expected her to understand. Hold your breath, because this isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about justice, long forgotten, about women who were silenced, and how they made the world listen again. The Ellington Hotel stood like a stone monument on Michigan Avenue, where traffic never paused, and the wind came slicing straight off Lake Michigan like glass. 13 stories tall, the building wore its age with pride gray granite facade, polished brass-framed windows, and carved in gold letters across the rooftop edge, established 1952 elegance for the elite. Inside, the air carried the scent of oak wood, white orchids, and freshly waxed marble floors. Towering pillars, crystal chandeliers, and staff dressed in tailored uniforms created the kind of place where refinement wasn't just expected. It was a silent currency. And amid all that gleam and grace, Naomi Carter moved like a whisper. Her soft, rubber-soled shoes made no sound on the floor. She had long since mastered the art of not being noticed. Naomi was 30, petite but solid, a veteran housekeeping attendant at the Ellington, always on time, work meticulous, never caught in employee drama, and almost never caught on security footage, not because she was hiding, but because the world had taught her how to disappear in a place where only those in suits were truly seen. What most didn't know, Naomi once studied linguistics at the University of Illinois, fluent in 3 languages, English, French, and Mandarin, but her academic dreams ended at 21, when her father suffered a stroke. The medical bills eclipsed her scholarship. She dropped out, became the sole provider for her mother and 2 younger siblings, tutored, waitressed, cleaned floors. She had lived in the afterlife for almost a decade, a world where people called her by room number, where, thank you, was a luxury, unless it came with a tip. So on that quiet Wednesday morning in early December, when a black limousine pulled up to the main entrance, and a woman stepped out, Naomi didn't pay much attention. She was pushing her cleaning cart through the lobby, mentally calculating how long she'd need to flip 6 check-outs before noon. The woman, Mei Lin Chen, 56, carried an aura that was part old-world elegance, part weary survivor. Her dark hair, streaked with silver, was pinned in a high bun. Oversized Gucci sunglasses shielded half her face. A white cashmere coat draped over her shoulders. But it was the luggage that drew glances. Most Ellington guests wheeled polished Rimowa or logo, plastered Louis Vuitton trunks. Mei Lin's luggage looked like it came off a steamer ship from 1949. Aged leather, wrapped trunks, tarnished brass buckles, each piece adorned with hand-labeled tags in classical Chinese script. She walked up to the front desk with quiet composure and gently placed a red envelope on the counter, then began speaking, in Mandarin, fluent, assured, not a word of English. Rebecca, the waxy, blonde front desk associate, hesitated. "Good morning. Do you speak English, Mom?" The woman shook her head, said something else, longer this time, faster, her voice sharper, urgent. Rebecca forced a smile, raised her voice like volume could bridge comprehension. "Do you have reservation?" Mei Lin said nothing, She took out a neatly folded sheet of paper. Chinese characters at the top, and beneath them, in English, Mei Lin Chen VIP Suite. Check in today? Rebecca blinked. Wait, you're not scheduled until tomorrow, she said, motioning to her coworker to double check the system. Room not ready. Check-in is tomorrow. Mei Lin frowned slightly. She pulled out her phone, opened her confirmation email, and pointed at the date. Today. She said something again, clear-clipped, but no one understood. As Rebecca bent down to search the booking number, Mei Lin, almost absently, slid the red envelope across the counter with her left hand. William, the concierge, was walking by at that exact moment. He saw the envelope, saw the woman, saw the cold stillness behind her sunglasses, and thought one word: bribe. He approached quickly. Ma'am, he said quietly, this is unnecessary. We cannot accept bribes here. Mei Lin's brow furrowed. She replied in Mandarin, this time more rapidly. She pushed the envelope forward, voice rising. William stepped back. Please, ma'am. You'll get your room. No need for cash. I'll let the manager know. Mei Lin paused, then slowly withdrew the envelope, turned away in silence. Across the lobby, Naomi had seen the whole thing. No words, no startled glance, just her hands resting behind her cleaning cart, tulips freshly arranged for suit 3005. She recognized the language, the accent, Beijing, and the last sentence. Not about money. It meant, I need to speak with the manager. This is important. Then Naomi saw something even deeper. The way others looked at Mei Lin, like she was a nuisance, a noisy foreigner, a woman who didn't understand the rules of America's polished civility. Naomi knew that look. She had lived under it. And something in her shifted, like the first crack in a frozen lake. She didn't intervene, didn't speak up, just kept walking, quietly. But when the red envelope was mistakenly placed in the clean towel bin on the third floor, when Mei Lin sat curled in a lounge chair, alone and out of place, and when a jade pendant slipped from her coat and Naomi was the one who picked it up, that's when the real story began. With a key, and a language no one thought Naomi Carter still remembered, Mei Lin Chen arrived on a Wednesday morning, just as snow began to dust the black stone rooftops of Chicago. The kind of cold that didn't just nip at your nose. It cut through bone. Not the damp chill of the West Coast she'd grown used to in San Francisco, but a Midwestern winter. Brutal. Honest. Like the city itself. A sleek black limousine pulled up to the grand entrance of the Ellington Hotel. The doorman moved swiftly, perfectly polished smile in place. But he paused slightly when he saw the woman step out. She didn't look like the usual guests of the Ellington. No body, con designer dress. No stilettos. No glossy, sculpted face. Instead, a Chinese woman in her early 50s. Cream cashmere coat, hair tied in a high, graceful bun, sunglasses covering most of her face. Behind her rolled two unusual suitcases. Not the kind you'd find at a luxury boutique. One was a leather-wrapped wooden trunk, aged dark with time. The other looked like an old library catalog drawer turned into luggage. They had wheels, but they creaked. Brass buckles. Wooden tags tied to the handles. Hand labeled in delicate Chinese calligraphy. Welcome to the Ellington, ma'am. The doorman offered with a faintly uncertain smile. Mei Lin didn't answer. She gave a barely perceptible nod, then pointed to her bags and spoke, a clear, fluid stream of Mandarin. The doorman blinked. I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't understand. Still no frown, no frustration. She simply repeated herself, slower, more measured this time, a soft hope in her tone. But the man was used to simpler interactions. Call me a taxi. Bring my bags? Where's the spell? He just smiled, said, yes, yes, and waved the bellhop over. She followed silently, calm on the outside, but something in her gaze began to tighten. At the front desk, Rebecca was adjusting her name badge when she noticed the woman approaching. Reflex kicked in. Smile. Stand tall. Project elegance. Good morning. Welcome to the Ellington. May I have your name, please? Mei Lin removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes as black and sharp as obsidian, but rimmed with exhaustion. She spoke in Mandarin. Short, direct, a low, steady voice, crisp Beijing accent. Rebecca froze. I'm sorry, ma'am. Do you speak English? Mei Lin shook her head, then said something else longer, faster. Rebecca glanced around, hoping someone, anyone, on shift knew Chinese. No one. She turned back, forcing a polite smile. Do you have a reservation? Booking? The guest didn't reply. Instead, she pulled a neatly folded piece of paper from her coat pocket, handwritten characters in graceful Chinese. But at the bottom, one clear English line, Mei Lin Chen VIP Suite Deck 12, Rebecca typed quickly into the system. Yes, there it was. But the check-in date was tomorrow. Ah, I see the issue, she said with a smile. It seems your check-in is for tomorrow, not today. Mei Lin didn't understand. She tilted her head and repeated something again in Mandarin. Rebecca did what many do when faced with a language barrier. Spoke slower and louder, as if that would help. Check-in is tomorrow. Not today, your room, not ready. Mei Lin frowned gently. She pulled out her phone and opened an email. On the screen, confirmation. Today's date. Clear as day. She pointed at it and locked eyes with Rebecca. Just then, the sound of leather shoes echoed from the concierge desk. Rebecca called out, "Hey, we have a bit of a situation here." William walked over, glanced at the email, then at the woman, and nodded like he understood. "We'll get this sorted right away, ma'am. Please have a seat in the lounge while we prepare your room." But Mei Lin didn't move. She reached into her handbag. Rebecca and William assumed passport, but instead as she pulled out a red envelope. Traditional embossed silk pattern, thick paper, rich with texture. She placed it on the counter and said something, this time faster. Urgent, like she wanted to speed things along. William froze. He stared at the envelope, then at her, and whispered to Rebecca, "Is she trying to bribe us?" Rebecca shrugged, whispering, "I don't know. Maybe it's a cultural thing." William turned to face the woman. Smile gone. "Ma'am, that's very generous of you, but there's no need. We'll take care of your room. No extra incentive required." She didn't understand. She gently nudged the envelope forward. William stepped back slightly, almost afraid. I really can't accept that." Mei Lin exhaled. Quiet, not angry. But something in her expression changed. She took the envelope back, slid it into her bag, slipped her sunglasses on, and turned away, like she'd just closed a door inside herself. Behind the desk, Rebecca shook her head. "Another rich foreigner who thinks she owns the place." William scoffed. "Probably some silk tycoon. Thinks money skips the line." Neither noticed Naomi Carter watering plants by the elevator had heard every word. And Naomi, 10 years into a career of being unseen, tightened her grip on her cleaning cart. She knew exactly what had just happened. She knew the red envelope wasn't a bribe. It was respect. It was ritual. It was a kindness mistaken for corruption. And even though Naomi had learned to stay silent, today, something inside her cracked. A hairline fracture. But undeniable. She didn't step forward. Didn't speak up. Didn't argue. She just watched. And when the woman sat down alone in the lounge, no translator, no help, no one even noticing, Naomi quietly pulled out her phone, opened the Chinese translation app she hadn't used since sophomore year of college, and somewhere deep inside, a voice stirred. "I know what she's trying to say." Mei Lin sat quietly in the corner of the ground floor tea room, a place most guests ignored, except for solo travelers or hotel staff dodging the security cameras. Her arms were folded, her gaze fixed on the towering window that overlooked the Western Plaza. Snow still fell, soft as powder, sliding silently down the glass, as if the entire city had joined her in stillness. She was no stranger to isolation. In San Francisco, she was Madame Chen, an art collector, owner of a string of boutique galleries in the Mission District. A rare, wealthy Asian woman who still wore klipao to conferences and refused to speak English unless absolutely necessary. But here, in the heart of Chicago, she was a stranger again. No language, no allies, and worse, no one willing to listen. In her hand, she held a jade prayer bead necklace, once her mother's. Each bead whispered a promise. You don't have to shout, but you must make them stop and listen. Today, no one listened. Except one. Naomi Carter walked softly, as she always did, pushing her cleaning cart through the hallway. But this time, she didn't keep going. She stopped, drawn by something she couldn't quite name. Maybe it was the woman's eyes, sharp but displaced. Maybe it was the posture of someone who once commanded respect, now diminished by language she didn't speak. Or maybe it was because Naomi knew exactly what that felt like. She was just about to turn away when the jade necklace slipped from Mei Lin's fingers and hit the marble floor with a sharp click. It echoed, small, but clear, like a bell tolling in a chapel. Naomi stepped forward without thinking, bent down to retrieve it, but paused when she saw the inscription carved into one of the beads, the character Ein, peace. 您掉了这个, Naomi said softly, each syllable precise and tonal. You dropped this. Mei Lin's head snapped up. For the first time, her expression cracked, not with fear, not with irritation, but with disbelief, as if someone had unlocked the cell door of a dream where no one spoke your language. 你会说中文? She whispered. You speak Chinese? Naomi nodded.
我大学的时候学了5年。
Sigh, I studied it for 5 years in college. Mei Lin reached out, hand trembling slightly. Naomi placed the beads in her palm, but their eyes didn't break contact. A beat of silence passed, and then Mei Lin smiled, barely, like a thread pulling across her face, but soft enough to mend the whole thing.
谢谢你, Sa.
Thank you. They sat down together. No invitation, no resistance. As if the world outside was a play they had stepped away from. Naomi brewed tea, not out of duty, but from a ritual her mother once taught her. When you don't know what to say, offer someone a cup of tea. Mei Lin began to speak. Slowly, like unlocking old drawers sealed in dust, she spoke of her father, an immigrant who arrived in 1949, once a floor manager at the original Ellington Hotel, until he was fired after a scandal he never proved he didn't commit. She spoke of her mother, the last woman to hold the original blueprints for the hotel, but never credited for it. She spoke of this trip, not a vacation, a mission, a journey to reclaim a voice. She said in Mandarin, not because I need it, but because my parents never got the chance to speak the truth. Naomi stayed silent, but something inside her stirred, because somewhere in the middle of Mei Lin's story, it had become her story too. She nodded. I'll help you. Mei Lin blinked. You don't have to. I'm not doing it for you, Naomi said. I'm doing it because I know what it feels like to be invisible. And I know having one person understand your language. It can mean everything. From that day forward, Naomi became the bridge. She translated every document, every email, every receipt, the room agreement, the archive request. She stood beside Mei Lin during the management meeting, quietly whispering translations between Mandarin and English. Mei Lin was no longer alone. Naomi, still in her housekeeping uniform, had become an interpreter, a witness, a woman who could hear what no one else noticed. That's how the story began. No headlines, no press, no applause, just one sentence. In the right language, at the right moment, that pulled one woman out of isolation and dragged along buried truth out of the dark. 3 days after their first meeting, Naomi no longer felt like Mei Lin was a guest. She felt like a part of the hotel, a part that had somehow always been there, just unseen. No one questioned Naomi's presence by Mei Lin's side, not because they approved, but because they didn't know how to stop it. A janitor wasn't allowed in staff meetings. An elderly Asian woman who didn't speak English had no business there. And yet, somehow they were in every hallway, at every door, inside every conversation that should have been closed to them. But for Naomi, this wasn't just about compassion anymore. It was an awakening, because every night, when the cold mist crept over the top floors of the Ellington, Naomi would see Mei Lin carefully unpacking old wooden boxes from her vintage trunks. Boxes full of sketches, manuscripts, black and white photographs, and documents preserved like sacred relics, labeled meticulously in both Chinese and English, as if someone had spent decades preparing to tell a story no one ever allowed them to tell. At first, Naomi thought Mei Lin was just another eccentric wealthy woman, chasing ghosts from the past. But that changed the night she saw it, the original architectural blueprint of the Ellington Hotel. Only, it wasn't called the Ellington then. It was labeled Regal Hotel and Assembly Hall, and in the lower right corner, a tiny signature Safang Chent Deck, 1949. Naomi held the fragile paper with reverence. This was your grandmother's? She asked softly. Mei Lin nodded. Her name was Chen Safang. She came to Chicago from Guangzhou in 1938, one of the first Asian female architects in the U.S. but never recognized. Because she was a woman. Because she was a woman, Mei Lin confirmed. And because she was Chinese. The words sliced deep. An old wound reopened in Naomi's chest. What happened next? After World War II, this land was designated for a community center my grandmother designed. It included a small hotel, a theater, and a library for immigrants who couldn't speak English. Naomi's voice caught. A place for healing? Mei Lin smiled, bittersweet, yes. But in 1950, she was forced to sell the land. The official reason was urban restructuring. But in truth, she pulled out a copy of a legal document. A deed. It bore her grandmother's signature. But on the back, a handwritten note. I was told sign this, or leave the country. I chose silence. But this land will always remember. Naomi held the paper as if it breathed. As if history was pulsing in her hands. So you're here too. To reclaim what was buried. Mei Lin said, her eyes sharp. I didn't come here to vacation, Naomi. I came to prove this hotel was built on stolen ground, and buried within it is something that was never meant to stay hidden. Naomi stopped breathing. Mei Lin unrolled another drawing. This one, different, not the facade, the infrastructure, basement, pipes, utility rooms, service corridors. In the bottom corner, a softly shaded red oval, no labels, no room name, but clearly a room. This isn't on the current schematics, Naomi whispered. No, Mei Lin confirmed. My grandmother called it the listening room. What was it for? She said every building should have a space that doesn't speak, a place where no one is required to answer, only to be heard. Naomi sank into a chair. You think it's still there? Mei Lin looked her dead in the eye. I believe it was never removed, only sealed, and I believe that room holds evidence about ownership, about the original design, about why they wanted my grandmother silenced forever. Naomi said nothing for a long time. Then she stood. Then we'll find it. For the next 3 days, Naomi made excuses, vent inspections, deep, clean orders, routine maintenance, anything that gave her access to restricted floors. She compared the modern blueprints to the 1949 plans. Something was off on the 5th floor. Officially, it housed storage, outdated boardrooms, and technical offices no one used. But Chen Sufang's drawing, it showed something else, an oval room, surrounded by thicker than normal walls. No windows, no markings. Listening room, Naomi murmured. Mei Lin gave a faint smile, like a heart, walled off, but still beating. And then, one night, Naomi found it, not with maps, but with instinct. It was just after 1 a.m. She slipped into conference room 5B, always locked, always empty. No one paid her any mind. She was just the night shift, but she noticed the floor felt different, hollow. A deeper echo when she tapped her heel. She rolled back the carpet, found a seam in the foundation, not on any blueprint, a crack, a wooden panel painted the same color as the wall, no handle, just a recessed latch, shaped like a plum blossom. Naomi stood motionless, then reached into her pocket and pulled out the jade pendant Mei Lin had given her, a carved plum blossom, exactly like the one on the door. Rain lashed against the basement windows like warnings from a past never welcomed here. Naomi Carter pushed open the heavy door to the old technical archive room. Once the main maintenance hub of the Ellington Hotel, no one had set foot in this part of the building in years. Damp air mixed with the scent of rotting wood, creating a cold, almost uneasy stillness. Mei Lin followed closely behind, her hand gripping a small flashlight. The beam flickered across rows of shelving units stacked with old file boxes. Each box bore yellowing labels, most faded beyond recognition, some half-torn, dangling like relics left behind in a city that had long moved on. Naomi took a deep breath. I've been down here once before, she said. But no one believed there was anything worth keeping. Mei Lin gave a soft, sorrowful smile. It's often the things deemed worthless that hold the deepest truths. They began searching, shelf by shelf, year by year, project codes, original contractors, everything at shelf E7 marked for architectural designs from 1947 to 1953. Naomi froze. A pale blue box, larger than the others, was wedged tightly between two smaller ones. as if someone had deliberately stuffed it in to keep it from being removed. Naomi pulled hard. The box dropped with a thud. Dust exploded into the air. The sound echoed through the silence, then faded, swallowed whole by the dark. Inside, a translucent blueprint of the 5th floor, printed on vellum. A sealed envelope, waxed in red, with no address. And a bronze pendant, shaped like a dragon and phoenix, no larger than her thumb, tucked inside a pouch of deep purple velvet. Naomi stared. This looks just like the symbol on the door. Amelin crouched beside her, her hand trembling. It's the emblem of my family, she whispered. My grandmother wore a necklace with that exact piece the entire time she worked on this hotel. She used to say, when you see this, you'll know you're in the right place. Naomi unrolled the blueprint. It was a floor plan of the 5th floor, completely different from the modern layout. Alongside meeting rooms and hallways, at the very center, a large oval space, marked as Room 0, the listening room. Beneath it, handwritten in ink, for the ones who cannot speak, and the ones who must listen. S.F. Chen, Deck 1949. That night, Naomi and Mei Lin returned to the 5th floor. The hotel had gone quiet. Night shift had rotated. Only dim amber light lined the thick carpeted hallways, making their footsteps vanish into silence. They passed meeting room 5B, the place where Naomi had first heard that hollow echo beneath the floor. She knelt, pulled back the rug, exposed the crescent-shaped seam. Mei Lin reached into her coat and pulled out the bronze dragon phoenix pendant. She pressed it into the recessed slot on the wall, the exact location of the hidden symbol. A soft click echoed, like the exhale of something buried for 70 years. The wooden door creaked open, slow, reluctant. A rush of cold air poured out, thick with the scent of aged oak and ancient paper. As if the room had held its breath for a century, Naomi flicked on her flashlight. The beam cut through dust and darkness to reveal a circular room with low ceilings. The walls were lined with acoustic wood panels, curved in layers, like a miniature concert hall. At the center, a small, raised platform, and on it, an old-style microphone, perfectly preserved, no dust, no rot, just waiting. Beneath the platform, a recessed drawer. Naomi reached forward and pulled. Inside, a reel of audio tape, labeled February 28, 1950, The Truth. An original hand-drawn blueprint, no copies, no scans, bearing the bold signature. So Fang Chen, and an unsent letter, handwritten, I leave this here for the one who knows how to listen, the cleaner. The one they said had no voice. Bring it into the light when the world is finally ready to see. Mei Lin exhaled, a sharp, shaking breath. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but her gaze burned bright. Naomi looked around the room, her hand brushing the microphone. Do you think anyone else knows about this place? Mei Lin slowly shook her head. No one. Only those who've been forced into silence know the importance of creating a place, just to be heard. They closed the door again, carefully. But inside their hearts, nothing was quiet anymore. Mei Lin clutched the reel of tape to her chest, like it held a soul. Naomi whispered, Hiss, this isn't just your story anymore. Mei Lin nodded. And it was never just mine. Naomi stood frozen in the circular room, not out of fear, but because she didn't dare breathe too loud. Her flashlight skimmed across the ink, washed walls, shimmering like jade under the beam. No cracks, no stains of time, only stillness, so profound it felt like the room itself was holding its breath with them. Mei Lin stepped inside, clutching the small wooden chest they had just discovered in the drawer beneath the microphone stand. The chest was hand-carved from sandalwood. On the lid was the symbol of double happiness. But instead of the traditional red, it was painted in deep black ink, an intentional, deliberate choice. Naomi crouched near the wall. This isn't paint, it's actual ink. Mei Lin nodded gently, eyes misty. It's shui mo, traditional Chinese ink wash. My grandmother learned it from her great-grandfather. They painted silk scrolls before she ever came to America. I suppose she thought, if history couldn't be recorded in legal ink, then maybe it could still be written in memory. Naomi touched the wall with her fingertips. To the left was a black and white photograph, enlarged, of an Asian woman in a qipao dress holding a drafting ruler. She stood beside a hanging blueprint, with the frame of an unfinished building in the background. Her face glowed with pride. Yet there was a flicker of hesitation in her eyes, as if she knew the trust she had given could be betrayed at any moment. "Is that Chen Sifang?" Naomi asked. Mei Lin nodded. "The only surviving photo we have in the family records. The others disappeared after she was forced off the project." Naomi turned back to the chest. "Shall we open it?" Mei Lin gave a small nod. Inside was a stack of aged documents, tied with a red silk ribbon. Beneath them lay a handkerchief, embroidered with the words, "To the silence that speaks louder than words." Naomi untied the ribbon and pulled out a letter, handwritten, in fading blue ink on yellowed paper. The heading read, "To Chen Sifang, if you ever return to this place." Naomi's voice caught. Mei Lin furrowed her brow. "It's not from my grandmother." Naomi shook her head and continued reading, her voice unsteady, but clear. "Sifang, I'm writing this after the meeting that we, or rather, just I, was summoned to attend. They asked me to sign the land use contract. This time, without your name. They said, she has no citizenship. She cannot hold legal ownership. I knew it was wrong, but I signed it anyway. They told me if I refused, the entire project would be shut down. If I didn't cooperate, I'd be labeled sympathetic to Asian spies. McCarthyism was everywhere. I was terrified. And in that cowardly fear, I forged your signature. They gave me a seat on the city's architectural council. They put my name on the golden plaques and erased yours from the record. I wanted to confess. But then you vanished, and everything was buried. I know I cannot restore your honor, but if you ever return to this place, use this room. Use the memories. Use what I've left behind to tell the story no one else dared to speak. Forgive me, and if you can't, then speak for everyone who, like you, was forced into silence." Robert E. Millard Mei Lin sank to the floor. She clutched the letter like a stolen piece of memory finally returned. "Robert Millard," she whispered. "He co-designed this entire project. That name is on every legal document since 1950. Naomi slowly sat beside her. "So he was the one who signed in her place." Mei Lin nodded, and became the man who received all the glory. They sat in silence for a long time. The room was no longer just a secret. It had become a witness, a heart beating again after 70 years under seal. Naomi exhaled deeply. Now we have the original blueprints, the confession letter, the tape. And this room, Mei Lin looked at her, eyes calm but burning with clarity. And now we need justice. The room seemed to whisper with them, not with sound, but with space. A place built for those pushed to the margins. A place where truth didn't have to scream, to finally be heard. Naomi rose to her feet. "We're not keeping this to ourselves." Mei Lin stood beside her. "And we're not leaving this hotel until someone is forced to listen." The printer rattled nonstop in a cramped office of a local newsroom on Clark Street, just a few blocks from the Ellington Hotel. The ink was still drying on the headline of the very first article, "The Land BNA THELNTine Logiac Westolen." Investigative report by Julian Rivera, senior writer for the Chicago Voice. Subheading, "From a Forgotten Room to a Confession Letter, the Journey to Reclaim the Erased Legacy of a Chinese, American Architect." Naomi Carter and Mei Lin Chen stood by the window, watching the streams of people passing below. Not even 24 hours had passed since they brought the evidence to the Chicago Institute of Historical Studies. And everything had started moving, faster than anyone had expected. 3 days earlier, Naomi had entered the institute with Mei Lin, arms wrapped tightly around the blueprint scroll, the small wooden chest, and the audio tape. They were met by Dr. Camilla Wright, a middle-aged urban historian, already briefed by Julian. Camilla didn't ask many questions. The moment she saw the original architectural drawing with Sifang Chen's signature and compared it to the revised plans, her eyes lit up like she had just stumbled upon something she'd waited her whole life to uncover. When Mei Lin played the audio, recorded during the February 28, 1950 meeting, in which Sifang Chen protested the change in land ownership, Camilla whispered, "My God, we've been sitting on a cultural bomb that never got triggered." A Julian, who had once been sued for exposing a major real estate conglomerate in 2010, listened to the tape once, then nodded firmly. "I'll write it. I'll tell the whole story. But you both need to be ready, because once this goes out, there's no turning back. Naomi looked him in the eye, steady. I've cleaned rooms at the Ellington for 9 years. So many things get wiped off the surface, but never from memory. Amelin gently squeezed her shoulder. We've been silenced for 70 years. Not anymore. The day the article dropped, Twitter, now X, exploded with hashtags for justice for Sufang Fei Ellington legacy scandal Fev history raced on TikTok. A clip went viral, Naomi stepping out of the Ellington's front gate, holding the original blueprint high above a crowd of reporters. Set to a deep cinematic soundtrack. Caption, she was never in the textbook, but she built the building. In just 12 hours, the video hit 1.4 million views. Outside the Ellington, the crowds began to swell. It wasn't an angry protest. It was a memory vigil. Handmade banners stretched across the street. History isn't optional. No one should be erased from the foundation they built. Listen to the silent architect. Architecture students from Northwestern built a scale model of the listening room out of recycled wood and paper, placing it at the hotel entrance as a symbol of witness. Inside the hotel, the board of directors held an emergency meeting. We need a media lockdown. Immediately. Sell that room. Pour concrete over it if we have to. And that housekeeper, Naomi, fire her. Don't let her set foot in here again. A calm but firm voice cut through the chaos. That's not the answer. And everyone turned. Evan Millard, grandson of Robert E. Millard, the man who forged Su Fang Chen's signature to erase her from the project. He wore a simple button-down, no tie. But his eyes were sharp. I read my grandfather's letter. I heard the tape. A board member tried to interrupt. Evan, you don't understand how complicated. No, you don't understand. This is systemic heritage theft, and we're being exposed. He placed a printout of the article on the table. Naomi, she's not just a housekeeper. She's the only person who still believed a forgotten room, hidden for 70 years, could change the story of an entire landmark. That afternoon, Naomi received an email from one of Chicago's leading civil rights attorneys. Subject, let's talk legal restoration for Su Fang Chen. At the same time, across town at the Institute, Mei Lin sat beside Camilla and Julian, preparing for a press conference to launch the Su Fang Restoration Project, an initiative to return Su Fang Chen's name to architectural history books and create a traveling exhibit titled, The Woman Who Designed in Silence. The story was no longer trapped inside that hidden room. It had broken free, quietly, but with no intention of ever going back. Rain fell cold and gray over Chicago, like a warning no one could hear. Naomi hurried down the hallway of the 17th floor at the Ellington, her heart pounding. She had just gotten a call from Mei Lin's. Her room had been broken into. Room 1704 showed no signs of forced entry. Everything looked too normal, too clean. Mei Lin stood frozen in the center, phone still in hand, eyes blank. The sandalwood chest, the one that held the original blueprint, the handwritten letter, and the photo of Chen Sufang, was gone. The backup copy stored at the Historical Institute was safe. But the original, the emotional proof, the symbolic evidence, was missing. No cameras. No signs of a struggle. Mei Lin said, her voice tight with breath. Just a perfect kind of emptiness. Naomi clenched her fists. This wasn't a theft. It was a message. That same day, Naomi was summoned to the management office. Waiting for her was Carl Vance, CEO of the Ellington. A white man in his late 60s, silver hair slicked back, voice always tinged with the air of a man who thought breathing near you was a favor. Naomi, he began, smooth as motor oil, I'd like to remind you that distributing internal documents to outside sources is a serious breach of contract. And Naomi said nothing. Why reserve the right to terminate your employment, effective immediately? She raised her head, calm, unshaken. If you're going to fire me, she said, at least have the decency to admit it's not about a newspaper, but about removing a black housekeeper who dared speak truth. The Carl offered a faint, cold smile. This is business, Naomi, not a social movement, and business doesn't like mess. Later, back in the staff break room, Naomi noticed something missing. Otis, the night security guard, wasn't there. He was the first one who had loaned her the key to the maintenance elevator. the one who kept quiet when she and Mei Lin slipped into the basement after midnight. She asked the new guy on shift, "Where's Otis?" The guard shrugged. He got reassigned. Somewhere. Don't know. But Naomi knew. Otis had been made to disappear. Another silent threat. That night, in the tiny tea room behind the hotel kitchen, her usual end of shift retreat, Naomi found something strange tucked beneath the chamomile tin, a silver USB drive. No label, no note. She glanced around. No one in sight. Plugging it into the old HR office computer, one with no network tracking, Naomi found a single file, Confession Ellison. Muv, she hit play. On screen, a man in his early 40s. Ethan Ellison, grandson of Henry Ellison, the so-called father of the Ellington Project, and direct rival of Robert Millard. He sat in a dark room, lit only by a desk lamp, his voice hoarse, his eyes hollow. If you're watching this, then maybe I finally did one thing right. I was raised in a family that believed winning meant taking whatever others didn't protect hard enough. I knew what happened to Chen Sufang. I saw the real contracts. I read my grandfather's letter to Robert Millard. It wasn't just a conspiracy. It was a deal between giants, white capitalists, colluding to push out every Black and Asian voice from our city's landmarks. I thought silence would protect my family. But after I saw Naomi Carter and Mei Lin Chen standing before the press, I realized I was the one stealing justice. On this drive, you'll find my grandfather's letter to Robert signed the hushed money wire receipt to Sufang, a list of 6 other illegally transferred properties from 1951. He paused, looked directly into the camera. Use it, no matter what it costs me. Truth doesn't need permission to exist. Naomi sat still. This wasn't just evidence. This was a counterstrike from within the enemy's walls. She called Mei Lin instantly. Someone on the inside just switched sides. That night, as darkness fell over Chicago, camera flashes still lit the front steps of the Ellington like steady lightning. But this time, they weren't just facing threats. They had a spear made of truth, forged by the very hands that once kept it buried. Monday morning. The skies over Chicago hung heavy like sheets of lead. The entire board of the Ellington had been summoned to an emergency meeting in the Grand Chamber, a sealed room lined with ebony wood, once used to approve investments worth tens of millions. But today, it would decide something money could never buy back: honor and truth. Mei Lin Chen was the first to walk in. Behind her was Naomi Carter, no longer in her housekeeping uniform, but in a sleek black blazer, hair pinned back, eyes no longer hesitant, but burning with the quiet fire of someone who had once been made invisible, and now walked in carrying the torch of justice. And they weren't alone. The purpose of today's meeting, began Vincent Brayton, chairman of the board, is to address recent allegations concerning the historical ownership of the Ellington's land and the role of the late architect Chen Sufang in the original 1949 project. This is not a trial, he emphasized. We are simply seeking clarity. Naomi placed the silver USB drive on the table. Mei Lin opened a small case and pulled out a thick, color-coded folder. Vincent glanced at the items but didn't touch them. You may proceed. Naomi spoke first. Her voice wasn't loud, but every word carved the air like etching into stone. We're not here with accusations. We're here with what was once considered non-existent. But if you truly seek clarity, then you must look truth in the face. She turned on the projector. First slide, the original blueprint of the 5th floor, stamped, Sufang Chen 1949. Then, a photograph of a handwritten letter, in both English and Chinese, firmly declining the sale of the land, dated the exact same day as the forged deed transfer. Then came the video of Ethan Ellison's confession. No one moved. Only the slow whir of the ceiling fan broke the silence. Finally, Naomi displayed a side-by-side signature analysis, showing the original ink strokes of Sufang Chen and the forgery used in the official records. Mei Lin's voice cut through next, soft, but sharp as glass. This is no longer speculation. This is forensic evidence, eyewitness testimony, and the conscience of a city. Vincent shifted in his seat, fingers twitching toward the bell. But before he could strike it, the chamber doors creaked open. An elderly woman entered, leaning on a cane, Her eyes sparkled like magnifying lenses that had spent a lifetime peering through the layers of history. Naomi helped her to a seat. Vincent frowned. "Who is this?" Naomi answered gently, "The last living resident of the original building." Her name was Helen Wang. 84 years old, she had lived on the same floor as Su Fang Chen in 1948, daughter of a small corner grocer, where Su Fang once taught immigrant children how to read and write. She spoke slowly, voice raspy but unwavering. I remember her. She always wore a cream dress and carried a sketchbook in her arms. Every afternoon, I'd sit on the stoop reading, and she'd say, "This city doesn't belong to anyone, until it learns to hear the ones nobody ever asks." Helen looked around the room. She had no husband, no children. But she had a blueprint, one where every line carried the soul of an immigrant woman. And you erased her name as if she never lived. Now it's time to give it back. Silence. Vincent rubbed his chin. Another board member leaned forward. "So what do you want?" "A public apology. Compensation." Naomi stepped closer, her voice sharp as flint. "We want the erased room, the listening room, to be restored and preserved in its original state. We want Chen Soufang officially recognized as co-architect of the Ellington. And we want the Chicago Historical Institute granted exclusive rights to curate a 5-year public exhibition inside that space." Mei Lin added softly, "None of us want money. We only want justice carved back into stone." Vincent scanned the table. No objections. He nodded, slowly, heavily. Proposal accepted. Unanimous consent. As the meeting adjourned, Naomi stepped out onto the grand balcony. The rain had stopped. Below, crowds still stood in quiet vigil, holding signs like prayer. Mei Lin joined her. Naomi turned to her. "What do you think Soufang would say if she could see today?" Mei Lin smiled. She'd say, "At last, my voice has found someone willing to listen." There were no fireworks, no banners, no brass band. Just a closed-door meeting on the 22nd floor of the Ellington, 3 microphones, an electronic vote board, and faces that had learned to hide emotion beneath layers of power. But to Naomi Carter, that Monday morning felt like a coronation. For a generation the world had forgotten. The special board session began promptly at 8:30 a.m. Vincent Braden, presiding as chairman, spoke in a tone lower than usual. Less arrogant, yet still tinged with the wariness of a man walking the tightrope between legacy and liability. "I present 3 motions for vote," he announced, eyes scanning the room slowly. Official recognition of Chen Soufang as co-architect of the Ellington Hotel. Transfer of 30% symbolic equity to her direct descendant, Ms. Mei Lin Chen. Establishment of a Cultural Heritage Council under executive oversight with Ms. Naomi Carter appointed Director of Cultural Exchange. Each vote clicked into place on the screen. Brayton, Y.E.S. Maxwell, Y.S. D'Angelo, Y.E.S. Walker, Y.S. Holloway, Y.S. Tran, Y.E.S. De Darkta, Karen Elgin, Y.S. Ruth Wallace, Neno Gilbert Strauss, Neno Sheldon Granger, Abiste Aine, result 7 in favor. Motion passed. Mei Lin didn't smile. She only tightened her grip on the coral prayer beads around her wrist. Each bead a heartbeat, a memory from 3 generations of the Chen family, whose name had vanished from records in stone. A lawyer handed her a slim folder, legal confirmation of her 30% symbolic equity, and a new title cultural trustee. It wasn't flashy, but it came with voting power over all decisions involving the Ellington's media, historical curation, and cultural design. From now on, Soufang's story would never again be edited out of the brochure. Naomi remained seated. No one called her to the podium. No applause, no speech. Just a cream-colored envelope slid gently before her. "To Ms. Naomi Carter, we recognize your unwavering commitment and the courage to translate more than language, to translate silence into presence. As of today, you are appointed Director of Cultural Exchange for the Ellington." That evening, she stood inside the room she once dusted each morning. It now bore a new plaque, "The Listening Room." Warm yellow lights bathed the walls painted with ink brush motifs. Soufang's original writing desk had been fully restored. Her portrait sat on a handcrafted shelf beneath a brass nameplate that read architect. Educator. Visionary, silenced once, never again. Mei Lin stood beside Naomi, dressed in a minimalist midnight, blue-cued pow, her hair in a high bun. She spoke softly, Maybe justice isn't about taking something back, but about being heard. Long enough, Naomi smiled, her eyes misted. Sometimes, just having someone believe in you. Enough to put your name on a piece of brass. That is a revolution. 3 days later, Naomi started her new job. She launched a weekly program called Echo Sundays, a space where, every Sunday, the Ellington would open part of its lobby gallery for everyday citizens to share stories that were once silenced. There was the single mother with an unsent letter, the young immigrant poet with a tattered notebook, the elderly black man who had once been denied a seat because of his skin, now invited to sit and speak on the very chair meant for him in 1962. Meanwhile, Mei Lin quietly published a book, The Room That Listened. It wasn't just a memoir, it was a collection of lost memories, dug from the walls of silence and rewritten in 3 languages: English, Chinese, and Whisper. The book quickly hit the Chicago Tribune bestseller list with this review, a slow echo, but a deep one, from those no one thought would ever hold a mech. By winter, the Ellington rebranded. The hotel's new logo included a single line beneath its name, built on memory, restored by truth. No one called Naomi, the janitor from the 5th floor, anymore. She was a director, a storyteller, a bridge between history and the now. But to Naomi, the most important title came from a 6-year-old brown-skinned girl on a school tour who looked up and whispered, "You're the first person who made me feel like someone like me could have a place to tell their story too." And Naomi smiled. She didn't need a trophy, just a voice that could be heard, without ever needing to shout. Justice wasn't born in a courtroom. It began the moment one woman chose to truly listen. The words are engraved on a small bronze plaque, mounted just outside a quiet room, tucked at the far end of the south hallway on the 1st floor. A space that once served as an exclusive tea room for the upper class. Today it bears a new name, the Bridge Room. Not because it connects the 2 wings of the hotel, but because it connects 2 ends of history, where stories once silenced finally find their voice. Inside, the room glows with warm, golden lamplight. On the display shelf is a weathered leather suitcase, a Lenin-wrapped sketchbook, an old Underwood typewriter, and a broken strand of pearls missing a single link. Nothing in here is worth $1 million. But every item is a memory, a witness, a moment that nearly vanished. Naomi Carter steps into the room, holding a printed folder. She's preparing for the afternoon historical tour, a special program she created called Whispers in the Walls. There are no microphones, no guides with headsets, only her voice, low enough to stir curiosity, soft enough to make people lean in closer. This room, she begins, glancing at a group of 10th graders standing in neat rows, was once reserved for the elite, where major business deals were inked, where women wore silk and men smoked Havana cigars. She pauses, lowers her voice, but the woman who laid the foundation of this building was never invited inside. A few eyes widen. Naomi offers a quiet smile. The story I'm about to tell doesn't begin with a title. It doesn't begin with power. It begins with someone forgotten and someone dismissed. She tells the story of Chen Sufang, an immigrant from Guangzhou, a self-taught architect who designed the 5th floor of the hotel, only to have her name erased because of race, gender, and greed. She tells of Mei Lin, Sufang's granddaughter, a woman who crossed oceans with nothing but an old sketch, a torn map, and the unshakable belief that something had been stolen. And she tells her own story, Naomi Carter, the janitor on the 5th floor, the girl with the mop, the one who secretly studied Mandarin from library books because her mother, once a translator, was never acknowledged. None of us began with power, she says. We began with something far less glamorous, the truth. Inside the Bridge Room, there's a small display called the Shelf of Echoes. Each week, it's updated with a new item from the community, a letter never delivered, dated 1963, a canceled wedding card due to interracial prejudice, a report card with a child's name misspelled because the teacher couldn't pronounce Asian names. Naomi calls them intangible heirlooms left behind, because heritage, she explained in a recent TV interview, isn't just about land deeds or stock shares. It's what people remember about you when you're no longer in the room. Mei Lin no longer lives at the hotel. She returned to San Francisco and now runs the Room That Listened Fund, a nonprofit supporting communities erased from official records, helping them preserve, rewrite, and publish stories long silenced. Naomi is the fund's senior advisor. She doesn't speak much at gala events. She doesn't wear designer gowns or promote beauty brands. But every time she returns to the bridge room, she places her hand on the wooden window frame, closes her eyes, and listens. Listening, she tells students, is the quietest form of resistance, but also the strongest. To listen is to refuse letting history be written solely by the victors, without the testimony of the erased. One early spring afternoon, Naomi received a letter. It was from an 8th grade boy who had taken the hotel tour. Dear Miss Naomi, it read, after your tour, I went home and asked my grandma why my grandpa was never in the history books. She cried. Then she told me he was the first man from Haiti to open a tailor shop in South Side Chicago. I wrote it down. And I'd like to donate a copy to the Bridge Room. I think my grandpa deserves an echo there. Naomi folded the letter. A single tear slipped down her cheek, not from sadness, but from the quiet certainty that the bridge she was holding was finally being walked across.